In today's episode of the Pathfind Presents podcast, I got a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with David Clayton, who's hailing over from True and North. He's a design thinking expert, and basically today we want to really learn from him about True and North. They will basically help you to shift your mindset to a client-centered culture, really taking that particular angle so that you can identify opportunities by walking into your client's shoes. So, David, welcome to the show.
Well, look, thank you so much for having me, Lucas.
Sure. So maybe give people a quick overview. What is True and North all about in your own words?
So in its simplest possible form, we're a training firm, and we get really excited about helping people have their best possible interactions with their clients. So that's it at its most basic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe tell us what types of companies would come to you guys and what's sort of the things that they want to get from the collaboration with you guys.
All right, let me give you the slightly longer version. So what we do is we work with businesses in the B2B space, and again within that, almost exclusively in and around kind of advertising, media, marketing services. So we might be working with large platforms, say like Meta or Twitter. We might be working with kind of well-known media owners, but in a more traditional sense, so like Channel 4 or the BBC, kind of back in the UK. And then the agencies that kind of connect the brands through to consumers. And so in that case, we'll be working with, again, people in the larger holdcos, the likes of the Publicis Group or IPG, or in independents. So, shops that might be, just a few hundred people or indeed 50 people. But all of those different folks, whether they kind of identify as kind of salespeople or not, they all have to, I suppose, help their clients and know how to do that in a way that kind of feels intuitive to them. And kind of helps both grow. So that's what we do, is we leverage design thinking to make, I suppose, consultative sales something that people actually want to do. It feels natural to them.
And what would you say? What types of organizations would be a good fit? Like, what would be sort of, a typical customer? Like, is it a certain industry, certain size? Like, you guys would be working with?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Meta. So, for example, they're a fairly typical customer. So, if you think about them as an organization, they are helping businesses advertise. And so if you are on the kind of Meta sales team, you are looking to work with agencies and brands directly and helping them achieve their objectives through Meta's various platforms. And we are one of kind of many kind of training providers that they have access to help them do that better, help them do it in a more human way, in a more efficient way in our case. So that's a very big organization, of course. But then, we might be working with a really high growth organization that's much, much smaller. So one that might come to mind is Sensat. So Sensat are a business that uses AI for construction. So they're really, really interesting. They're growing super fast. And in that instance, you've got a group of people who are selling all over the world, and they're selling something that is new and different. And to do that can be a bit tricky. And so we provide them a way to do that feels intuitive, feels natural. And so that's kind of where we come in, providing training workshops to help people sell stuff in a way that people actually like.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really good. So maybe give us then an insight, like how do these guys learn about True North? Like, what's their journey looking like?
So I think that, there are a couple different ways in which people are going to find out about us. At its most basic, there's word of mouth. So we kind of over time, have built a certain amount of cut through in certain industries. And if somebody's been working for a period of time in company X, usually to find the next job, a percentage of them are going to have to go to company Y. And when they do, they'll look around and think, how can I equip my team to be more successful? And in some instances, it's quite natural for them to kind of remember True and North and call us, and then we can move into that company as well. So there's that kind of organic type growth. The next piece is partnerships. So that's a really important approach for us. So we will work with consultancies. So let's imagine you are a business and you're going through a transformation. You might be advised on that journey, or that journey might be designed for you by a consultancy. And as it comes to the moment of thinking, how do we make this thing stick? That's where training usually comes in. So if we are in partnership with those consultancies, at that moment, they'll know to refer us into that conversation. So that means that as a small organization, we don't have to cover huge amounts of territory. And we don't have to worry about timing because our partner is going to refer us at the moment when it's necessary. So it kind of covers off a kind of two of the key challenges you have as a sales organization there. So partnerships are really important. Then, of course, there's our own outreach. So, that's stuff which we'll be doing ourselves, running our own events, kind of engaging with people, kind of LinkedIn, email, and the like. And then finally, there are third-party events. That's where people are either inviting us to speak on their program. So we're fortunate this year, we've been invited to speak at Cannes Lion at the Advertising Festival. And then in other instances, we won't be on the program, but we'll be going because we know our customers will be there or potential customers will be there. And that's an opportunity to meet them in the best possible environment. So there's kind of our outreach, there are events, there are partners, there's word of mouth. Those are kind of the key approaches for us.
Awesome. Very cool. Now, how do you think about the website? Like, what role does the website, you think, play for True and North? So
we think about it quite simply. So we're not doing huge amounts of transactions. So we're not thinking in massive kind of miniature. If I think about your expertise, those kind of micro decisions that people have to make, we're not at that level because we're not having to think of all those different interactions. It's much more somebody has gone on a certain amount of that journey with us already, or we've kind of been mentioned to them. We've perhaps made it onto a pre-shortlist or something like that. People are just beginning to think about potential providers. And when they land on the website, that's where they're going to see the brand. That's where they're going to see that we solve problems that they have. That's where they're going to see testimonials and case studies from people that either are like them or perhaps that they would aspire to be like in time. And that should give them the confidence to continue on that journey with us. So for me, the website is very much about giving people that reassurance, giving people that excitement, giving people those proof points that actually continuing with us is a super smart thing to do.
Very cool. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about sort of your journey. Maybe tell us a little bit about sort of like where you keep educating yourself. Like, there's so much content out there these days. Like, if we're talking even design thinking, like where do you find high quality information that you like to consume?
That's a really good question. So we're fortunate that kind of in and around the business, there are lots of smart people. So at the core team, we've got our facilitator network and then the partner organizations as well. And unsurprisingly, people are always sharing, got to read this, got to read that. And if I think about on my LinkedIn, the amount of tabs I've saved as I should read this and then fail to do it is nigh impossible to navigate. So there are all those things and kind of dip in and out of those. But the one thing that has served me well, I think since school, was just read The Economist. And the reason that is important is oftentimes people really get lost in the weeds. They get lost talking about their products. They get lost talking about their services. They think a bit too much about themselves. Whereas if you can really elevate and think, right, well, what's really going on in this industry? What's really going on in this country? What's happening over there? You can form the basis for a more informed conversation, a more interesting conversation with your client. You can bring a new perspective. You understand kind of what's happening a few layers above the transaction that you might go on to have. So that is actually, probably the one place I go for business news and information consistently and have done for an embarrassingly long time.
Very good. I got some rapid fire questions as we're slowly wrapping it up today. Are you ready for those?
Absolutely.
What is the last book that you read?
Ooh.
Or the last podcast? You can choose.
Trying to think. Last business book. Oh God, I'm terrible at remembering the names. I'm literally just going to type it now. You know the guy who does The Big Short, Michael Lewis. He wrote an incredible book about the relationship between Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And I'm just trying to remember what it was called, but It is called the Undoing Project. I absolutely love the Undoing Project. So it's partly factual, partly a story. It's all about two people, their journey together, how they were kind of codependent, how they made each other better, about real friendship, about like a huge journey, you know, as guys who were so incredibly clever, but also having to jump back on the plane and kind of go and defend their country. Like, it was a really inspiring story. So yeah, I absolutely recommend The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis.
Very good. What's one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
We are currently focused on, and you'll be, I suppose, unsurprised to hear this, is thinking about how we can be more sophisticated about not just the journey of prospects reaching us, but what happens after. So I think somebody will go through that process of meeting us, they'll have a workshop. What's the continuation after that? How do we kind of build that community? And so we've been investing a lot of time and effort and focus in elements like our delegate portal, and the touch points that go on afterwards that actually are light enough that people want to do them, and useful enough that they pay back for them and for us.
Very cool. Now, for the very last question, I'd like to do a bit of time travel, right? If we go to the very first day that you started True and North, right? It's a couple of years back. I can tell by the profile.
The lines on my face. Yeah.
No, that one. Very good. No, but what I'm curious about is, what's the one advice you would give yourself? Like, what's one thing that you would tell yourself for that journey? I'm
going to use some poetic license, and I'm going to interpret that question slightly differently. I'd probably want to go back even further. And I think the advice I'd give to anybody kind of starting out, leaving school in the early stages of, you know, their professional life is, you know, find somebody who you want to work for, somebody who inspires you, somebody who's going to develop you. I think where you find those, you call them mentors, or just people who grow you. I think that's more important than pretty much anything. When you look back on, I don't know if you think about yourself, Lucas, perhaps there are those first teams that you were a part of, those first managers that kind of formed your thinking. Probably those first 2 or 3 experiences shaped who you are as a professional and kind of how you see the world of business. So for many of us, that was just luck of the draw. So kind of finding that person, being intentional about finding people like that, where they work, what those skills are, the type of environment they create. I wish I'd have been a bit more thoughtful about that.
David, I really appreciate you gave us a quick insight into True and North today. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about True and North, what's the one thing people should remember?
If you want your customers to like you and buy from you, you should do our training. Everybody who does it says that it works.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathwing Presents.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.